Hey there friends, it's Missy again. Thanks so much for stopping in today. I'm back with a new layout for the Paige Evans design team, and I'm going to be using Paige's Bloom Street collection again for this layout, along with one of her cut files. And I was playing around before I started filming, and I went ahead and cut the heart sunburst on paper number 20, which is the watercolor dots. And I wanted to create a shadow effect, so I cut it again just slightly larger on paper number 5, which is this really pretty pink. And I'm going to layer the dots paper on top of the pink paper and kind of have the pink peeking out around the sides just to create a little bit of depth and interest. And I have no idea what I'm going to do from here. This was just my first initial thought. I did pick my photo. I picked a pool photo because when I look at this cut file, I see the photo in a circle kind of going right in the middle. That's just my first thought. And so somehow, some way, I'm going to make that work on my layout. And I punched it using, I think that's a 2.5-inch circle punch that I used. I'm going to use white, thick, smooth cardstock as my background because I want to do a lot of mixed media. And I'm going to coat the whole thing with some clear gesso. This is the Art Basics Finnabair clear gesso, and I'm using a 2-inch silicone brush to smudge it on. And then I let it dry, and then I pulled out a ton of blue and green shimmers. I wanted to create some blue on the bottom half and some green up top because that is kind of how the photo is. You'll see it again here in a minute, but there's some green leaves and hedges behind my daughter, and then the pool is the bottom part of the photo. So I wanted to kind of recreate that color scheme in the background. And I'm just using a lot of different blue shimmers here. I've got Vibes Jenny B Blue, which is my all-time favorite blue from shimmers. I've got Vibes Seize the Day, Vibes Snow Wayman, and Coloring's Well Blew Me Down. And I just like to spray it directly onto the paper, spray a little bit of water to kind of dilute it a little bit, and then just pick up the paper and tilt it in different directions and just let it run and do its own thing. And this kind of eliminates the brush stroke effect. Sometimes I want that, but a lot of times I don't, especially if I'm doing a big color wash on the background like this. I just want it to look like a big watercolor section, but I still want it to look messy and random. And so I feel like this effect is really easy to do, and you're going to get a different look every time, and you really can't mess it up. You know, you're in control of how much you add. You can always dab it up if you don't want it because the gesso allows that to happen before it dries, and it's just great. I love it. So I'm going to go with green at the top, and let's see, I'm mixing in Spritz 4-leaf clover, Colorings Don't Citron Me, a little bit of Vibes Palm Reader, and then Spritz, that's not a word, Spritz Hint of Mint. And I'm just going to kind of do the same effect. I do use a brush sometimes. It just depends on where I want the color to go and how much water I add and where I want it to blend. I don't want the green and blue to completely blend together. They're going to where they touch, obviously, but I want there to be a distinct green section and a distinct blue section. And I just always have napkins or paper towels nearby to kind of dab up any excess. And I think I'm going to put the cut file over, kind of crooked over to the right side. So it's going to kind of go on top of this blue and green, and you're going to be able to see it through all of the different sun rays. That's my thought process up to this point, but all of it is, well, some of it is mostly dry. I decided to go in and add some white splatters, and I love how this looks. When it hits the wet green and blue, it just sort of creates this marble effect. I think that's the coolest thing. I could watch that happen all day long. This is just white acrylic paint. Add a little bit of water to it to make it a little bit more diluted, easier to flick around, and then I just splatter it down. Some of the white dots I leave white, and then some of them I blend into the wet watercolor to kind of lighten things up and just to create these nice white circly blobs. I think that's a cool look. And I really like how this is going so far. I like this background. We're going to keep working on it a little bit more. I'm going to add some splatters. I'm going to come back in with some of those blues and greens. And sometimes I get asked what I'm using to create the splatters, and it's just the nozzle from the spray. I just make sure it's mixed up really good, unscrew it, take it out, and then just use the nozzle. That's what I use most of the time. If I'm using a brush, it's for something else, kind of like the white acrylic paint. It doesn't have a nozzle, so I just use a brush for that. But that's the easiest way for me to make splatters. And then, you can get different effects with the splatters. If you want your color to be nice and dark, like you see that green, it's pretty dark, just leave it, let it dry naturally. If you want it to look a little bit softer, dab it up, or, roll some paper towels over it so it kind of softens the effect. And you can get, the effect of different colors just by the amount of time you let it sit there. So this is what I've got so far. I'm still kind of playing around with the placement of the cut file. I'm still leaning toward the right. I think it's going to work better over there. I'm going to go ahead and layer up some cardstock behind my photo there, since there's no white edges. Usually with my photos I have a white border, but usually my photos are square or rectangle. But since this one's a circle, I need to add some white around the edges. And this just kind of creates a solid border that's going to help separate the photo from that busy pattern paper. Because a lot of times when you have, a lot of color in your photo and you have it right on top of a busy, colorful pattern paper, the photo can tend to get lost. And I don't ever want the photo to be overpowered by anything else on the page. I want it to stand out. And so I feel like by layering in some solids behind it, it just kind of helps it stand out a little bit more against that background. It kind of creates a separation between the edges of the photo and then all those polka dots. That yellow paper that I added behind the circle photo was paper number 14. And it's very subtle, but I think it makes a big impact, in the final appearance of the layout. I'm going to go ahead and glue the two cut files together so I can just kind of move those around as one unit. And I did offset it so you can see the pink around the edges there, and that's just going to create that fun shadow effect. And then I'm going to very carefully go around and distress the edges of all of these sunbursts, because I want some texture and I want to kind of fold the top layer kind of in the center of each of the rays to kind of make it stand up off the page to create some depth. And that's always one of my favorite things to do on a layout, is to create some dimension. All right, so once I got that done, I realized that the whole left side of this background is just plain white, boring, and what am I going to do with it? So the first thing I thought was, let me just extend the mixed media over to the left. Not the green and the blue, just the blue at this point. So I'm going to come back in with those shimmer sprays, use my finger, use my brush, tilt the paper this way and that way, and just kind of let it run a little bit more over to the left to give that side of the page some interest. That's kind of a roadblock I always run into when I do a layout like this, where I do a lot of the stuff over to one side. Then I'm left with this empty other side, and it's like, well, what are you going to do? Sometimes I'll leave it blank, but sometimes that just bugs me, and so I want to do something to it. So this is kind of where I'm going to start, just by extending the background a little bit so there's something going on over to the left, because not sure yet at this point what else I'm going to do. So that's a starting point. I'm going to do the same techniques with the white acrylic paint, splatter that down. I love that. I think it's so cool. It's just boring white paint, but it makes such a big difference. So I let that dry, and this is what I've got so far. You can see the different shimmers there with all those different sprays. And this background looks so different when you add the cut file and the photo back on top of it. Love that. So I'm going to run the right side of that heart off the page. And then this is something that I did, my idea, but it's going to change. I cut out some of these hearts. This is from Bloom Street also. It's paper number 6. And I thought, well, let me just fussy cut some hearts to layer over to the left. Just an experiment to see how it would look. And I wind up not even using any of these hearts. I dipped into the flowers, which is, there's a whole ephemera floral die cut set in this collection. So I thought, well, let me try some flowers and start layering those around the photo and just see how that looks. If I like that better, if not, I'll stick with the hearts. So it's just kind of, this is the experimenting phase of the design process. When you just try this, you try that. In your mind, it may look one way. In reality, it may look a different way. You never know until you start to play around with it and see how you like it. And the more I play around with the flowers, I think I like the flowers better than the hearts. But I wasn't sure how much I wanted to do around the photo versus how much I wanted to do over on the left. So I took a break and I came back and I decided that here's what I'm going to do to the left side. I'm just going to add some yellow because I felt like I almost wish I would have done the shadowy part of the cut file with yellow instead of pink. So I felt like this layout needs some yellow. So I'm just going to rip and tear the background. I know I was cringing when I did this at first. But what I'm going to do is rip it and tear it so it looks uneven and messy. And then I'm going to replace the part that I just tore with some yellow. And I think this makes such a big difference because I felt like with this being a sunburst, I needed some yellow. You know, I've got lots of greens, I've got lots of blues, pinks, and then there's yellow in that polka dot paper. But if you got a sun going on as your main element, you need some yellow. So I'm going to make up for that now and add it over to the left. I'm going to glue that down and then I'll cut off the excess later. But I feel like this was the best decision in the end. It did kind of hurt my heart to rip the background, but I feel like at least it was on the left edge, so I didn't really tear a lot of the background up, but I think it needed to happen. I'm going to come back in with those hearts and flowers and leaves and try to create a little cluster over to the left. And like I said before, I do wind up using the flowers, but not the hearts. But I like how this cluster kind of pulls all the colors from the right side of the layout over to the left. I always like to do that when I have a layout like this where the bulk of everything is on one side. I like to kind of create balance by bringing all those colors and elements over to the left. And I like that. And then I got to looking at it and I realized that I've got all this yellow now over to the left. We need a little bit more yellow to the right to balance that out. So I'm going to add just a little bit of shimmers. This is a yellow called Mustard Seed. And this is a beautiful yellow spray that matches the yellows in this collection really nicely. And I'm just adding a little bit. I'm trying to be intentional about the spots where I put it. There was 2 little white areas still left over there. So I'm going to very carefully add that in. I'm going to mix in a little bit of this coral color, which is called Mango Tango, just to give it a little bit of interest and variation so it's not such a flat color. And then, you know, dab it up here and there, spread it around with the brush, and then bring the cut file back just to kind of see if this had the effect I was hoping for. I still haven't glued the photo down or anything like that, so nothing is permanent at this point, but I want to see how this looks. And I do like it a lot. I'm still going to add a little bit more yellow down there, but I'm still trying to be mindful of my white space. I still want to leave some empty white space that allows for some, you know, breathing room on the layout. Since I've got lots of color, lots of pattern, I always like to try to leave some open space for that reason. I'm going to come back in with the nozzle with the yellow and add some splatters since now yellow is a main color, and do the same thing that I did earlier with the splatters. And I'm going to come back in with some of the blues and greens also to add some more splatters. Same thing as before. And again, leave it down if you want it to be darker, and then if you want it to be more subtle, just dab it up with the tip of a napkin or roll a roll of paper towels right on top of it. The paper towel roll, I have found, it just kind of helps maintain the circle shape of a splatter. Sometimes when I use a napkin to dab it up, it can turn the circle into a blob. So paper towel roll will take care of that if you wonder why I use that like that. I think it works really nicely. So I'm almost done with this background. Pretty much dry. I love how that turned out, and I love how how it looks, just the watercolor aspect of it. And then here I'm just showing you that I did some stitching off camera. I used some metallic gold thread and I went through each of the sunbursts just to add some interest. I always love to do stitching, but I didn't want to stitch it directly to the background because I wanted to pop the cut file up off the page. So I went ahead and did my stitching on the cut file by itself, and then I can add some adhesive foam underneath it. So it's not stitched directly to the background, but it still has that stitched look, and it still has the effect of that texture and that shine from the gold thread. So I'm going to glue that down and make sure it's nice and flat. I do lay something heavy on top of this overnight so it's flattened out. I'm also going to pop the photo up with some more adhesive foam. And the more I look at the picture, I feel like this is perfect, because if you look at behind my daughter in the picture, it's the side of the pool. It's kind of at an angle, and it kind of is in the same line as the sun rays. It's kind of crooked, but it kind of matches. I thought that just turned out pretty cool. I didn't even plan on that happening, but it did. So sometimes the photo just kind of works with your background. Here comes all the embellishments. I'm going to use that little sunshine that I had cut in half and used half of it on another layout. I'm going to use that above the photo and then create this little cluster over to the left, or continue to work on it. I had kind of made it earlier, but trying to be mindful of what I'm going to do with the title, what I'm going to have as a title, where's it going to go. I'm going to use a couple of small things that are going to be considered title worthy, I guess you could say. I do want to add some thread, and I'm going to go with yellow first. I'm going to add two different colors of thread. I'm going to do yellow. I tried yellow down here underneath the cluster, but it just did not work. But you never know until you try. You know, like I said before, sometimes one color I think will look good in my mind, and then I try it and not so much. So I'm going to wind up moving it. And I moved it right underneath the photo, and I feel like that was a better spot for it. I'm going to continue to work on the layering of the flowers and the leaves around the photo there. I don't want to crowd it too much, but I feel like these flowers kind of help the photos stand out a little bit more, because they kind of read more as a solid, whereas the sunburst is more of a pattern. And solids around a photo always make it stand out a little bit more. I'm going to glue those down. I really like how that looks. And then for the cluster side, I'm going to come in with a darker aqua turquoise color to match the background, the blue section. I feel like this was a way better color choice to put there, because when I put the yellow thread on top of the blue, it kind of came across as a lime green, you know, because even though it's watercolor and thread, it's still yellow and blue mixed together is going to make green. And so you kind of have to, you know, just experiment with your colors and see what it looks like, and depends on the look you're going for. But I feel like this blue really was the best choice for this section. And earlier I did add some adhesive foam to some of the stuff down there in the cluster, this little sunshine piece here, and then some of the flowers. And so now that everything is glued down, this is what I've got so far. I really like how this is looking. I like all the textures and all of the dimensions. And yeah, we're almost done. And I am going to cut off the excess of that background yellow paper and then the parts over on the right. I'll do that later. But I'm trying to figure out if I want to add anything else for a title. So I'm going to come back in with some of the cardstock sentiment stickers, and then this little sticker from the sticker book that says Shine. Just trying to play around with where it's going to go. Oh, there's Paige. She's leaning in to give me a kiss with her wild hair. But yeah, I just decided not to go with a big title. First of all, where would it go? That would make sense. I felt like anything that I used that was big would just kind of make the layout look busier, and I'm trying to not do that. So we're just going to have some small titles, and sometimes that's okay. You know, you don't always need a big giant title. You don't even have to have a title at all if you don't want one. You know, it's your layout. You make the rules. You can do whatever you want. So we're going to go with 3 small little sentiments for the titles. So it could be anything really. Just trying to decide if I want to add any more flowers or anything else. I'm going to make sure that everything else is glued down, even if it's a sticker, because, you know, sometimes it's going to pop off, especially if there's mixed media involved. And then I'm just going to look for any final little bits and pieces to add in. I think I wanted to add in another pop of pink over to the left of the photo circle where the yellow thread is, just to kind of add it in. You know, sometimes it just feels right and you don't really have a reason, you just like it. So that's why I did that. And then the last thing I'm going to do is add some splatters. I hadn't done pink splatters yet, so I just want a little bit of a hint of pink splatters on the background, and that is Shimmer's Sweetheart. It's a Vibes, and make that subtle. See how it looks dark? I'm gonna dab it up a little bit so it's a little bit lighter, because I do want the background to be nice and light. And then of course I'm gonna add some gold. I felt like it was just the right thing to do, so I'm gonna use my Heidi Swapp gold color shine for that, and just add a little bit of shine and sparkle to the background since I've got the gold thread going on. And I'm also going to add my journaling with my metallic gold pen, so that's going to be another little bit of gold, and that's going to wrap it up. I do like to use my T-square ruler just to make sure that my journaling is straight, because I will definitely write in a crooked line if I don't. But anyway, that's the final layout, and I absolutely love how this turned out. I think you can see how the yellow made a big impact. I feel like that was a good choice on my part, but I really think this turned out nice. I love all the textures and the colors, all the different things. This was fun to do, and I hope it gave you some inspiration today on a fun way to use this cut file. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I took lots of close-ups here so you can see all the stuff up close, but I'll link what's available still from this collection down below. It's an older collection, so I'm not sure what might be left in the stores, but yeah, I will see you guys in my next video. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time. Thanks so much for being here.